I want to show you how to apply and sandblast a halftone photo onto a granite stone. Now with this, whether it's a marker or a personalization product, the process is pretty simple. However, there are some steps you have to take. So that's the reason I'm shooting this video for you today. This halftone photo is a 40 line screen. What that means is there's 40 dots per inch in this screen. The dots themselves aren't circular, they're more of an ellipse-shaped dot at a 45-degree angle, so you don't have kind of a moire pattern in the photo. This is on our 3mm stencil. You don't need anything heavier because we're not going to be blasting deeper or too terribly deeper than the polish of that stone. So I'm using a granite tile, black granite tile. Although I do want to point out there are, and you can see some of the flakes in the black, which would be kind of quartz in that photo or in that stone. Now, the more quartz you see in the stone, the more that quartz pattern is going to show through the halftone photo. So something to note, this particular stone will require a paint fill to cover those kind of patterns. If we don't cover those patterns with paint, you're going to see that stippling or that kind of tone in the face. First thing to do when starting your process, inspect your mask. Now we've already looked at it, but for you, the best approach would be to inspect the mask very well. Now, what I suggest you do is take a loop or optivisors and you actually look at that photo, ensuring that you're happy with the image itself, that it's clean, that all the dots are where they're supposed to be and it's in place. Now, when I'm looking at this photo, I'm going to take my loop, maybe you can see that, and I'm going to just go around my photo, just ensuring that everything is clean. I'm happy with the photo. I've pre-checked this and it looks good to me, so I'm happy to go with this particular photo. So the process here is, once you've checked your mask, once you're happy with the stencil, we've got to clean the stone. Now, I've pulled this right out of the box and you can see there's all sorts of polish and all sorts of grime on this photo or on this tile. Now you can take just a regular glass cleaner and certainly clean that stone. I'm going to be working my photo kind of in the center up top here, and that surface is fairly clean. However, to ensure you have your mask is going to adhere correctly, I'm going to take some acetone. You can use acetone, you can use lacquer thinner, you can use alcohol to make sure that stone is clean. Now, take precaution when using your glass cleaner and alcohol, because my next step is going to be to flame the surface of that stone. What the torch is going to do is it's going to drop any moisture on the surface of that stone, but ultimately it's going to burn away any impurities on the surface of that stone that perhaps your glass cleaner isn't cleaning, or your lacquer or your acetone isn't removing. So I'm going to turn on my torch and I'm going to heat this surface where I'm going to be applying my stencil. Now you can see that moisture being drawn up on the stone. The last thing you want to do is have that moisture come up on the stone while you're blasting. So we're going to make sure there's no moisture in the surface of the stone. Happy with that. It's warm, not necessarily hot. Flaming the stone is something that I think is probably most important. Heck, if you didn't clean your stone, if you just took a dirty rag and wiped your stone, heat would be a better cleaner than actually using a glass cleaner or a solvent to ensure that the stone is clean. That heat's going to burn off anything on that surface. So we're going to take our halftone photograph. We've looked at it. We've confirmed that it does look good. We're going to remove the carrier liner, that cover paper, which kind of just floats on the surface. The better way, or a couple of ways to apply that stencil or to make sure the stencil goes on the stone easily, is you can take a corner of the mask, fold it over onto itself, and that creates a bit of a pull tab. You can separate the resist from the plastic liner slightly, so that when you apply your stencil, you already have a pull tab to start. So I'm going to apply this photo about center, going to kind of work the center of my image, and I'm going to work outwards just to make sure that I don't have any trapped air in my photo. Now, if you have a burnisher and it's kind of scored and kind of rough on the edges, that score line or that plastic is not going to lay flat against the surface of your stone. So if you do have some pretty rough squeegees, get some new ones. They don't cost that much. So I'm going to just work out my image, my mask, just ensuring that I don't have any trapped air in my photo. Mask application is absolutely everything to ensuring that you have a good blasted photo. You can't spend too much time ensuring your mask is tight and flat. Now, we have a water-based stencil. This is a water-based photoresist film. The heat is not only cleaning the stone, but it's actually also drawing the mask against the surface of that stone. So it's kind of just absorb, kind of hold tight that mask to the surface of that stone. The squeegee is compressing, it's pushing the mask flat, tight against that stone. So the better, the more and the tighter you can squeegee using your burnisher, compressing that mask rather than pulling the burnisher against the stone, the tighter that mask is going to be to the surface, and that's really the key. So I'm pretty happy that this is squeegeed down. I'm going to come to my plastic liner, and rather than just pulling up on the liner, creating surface tension against the plastic and that resist, I'm going to fold it over like you would a piece of car vinyl and roll that back so the surface tension is breaking right at the surface of that mask. Or you can snatch it like a Band-Aid, pull it quickly. But that peels away very easily. None of the area is actually pulled up against the stone because I didn't rip or didn't pull upwards against that mask. Now, to ensure your mask is tight and flat, use your optivisors or use your loop. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this on. This optivisor has light, and I'm going to inspect my mask, making sure I don't see any trapped air or any irregularities in my photo. It looks great to me. If you want to look, you can kind of see, hopefully you can see that. So my mask is nice, tight, flat to the surface. Hopefully you can see that. A couple other application tools that I'll point out. Some people use, some people don't. Number one is our wire wheel roller. What the wire wheel roller is designed to do is perforate any trapped air that there could be in a design when using a photographic film. Now, I don't see any trapped air here, so I'm not going to be too concerned about using the wire wheel roller for a halftone photo. But if you do, if you were, you're just going to roll over relatively lightly against the surface of that photo. Now, I'm just going to do this lower half, just an illustration. I'm not rubbing, I'm not pressing or pushing against that wire wheel roller, just rolling over the surface, letting the fine brass wire perforate any trapped air there could be. Now, if you have a pretty old wire wheel roller and all your wires kind of hooked, yeah, it can grab a dot and it could pull it up. So you want to make sure you're using a good tool. Again, always fall back on your inspection tools, your loop or your optivisors, to ensure you have a good clean mask. Now, one thing that I always do is after peeling that liner, if there was a little bit of that liner that pulled up against the stencil, I'm pretty sure there's not, I would use our rubber roller. And I'm just making sure our mask is secure as it can be to the surface. So again, you can't, in my opinion, you can't spend too much time in the application stage of your your mask application. It's just going to ensure you're going to have a good photo. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tape off my photo. I don't want to blast outside my pattern. And if you want to make sure your tape is secure, your little rubber roller is a great way to just ensure that everything is tight against the surface of that stone. Now we're ready to blast. Let's talk about the media that we're going to be using and the media that you can use when blasting a photo. Ideally, you want to use like a 220 grit, which is pretty fine, pretty fine media. A 150 grit, which is kind of middle of the road. Maximum grain size would be a 120. You don't want to use anything coarser than a 120 grit. 120 grit is pretty large. Our photo dot pattern is pretty small. So the larger your grain of media, the more that media is going to hit the center of that dot space in your halftone, and it actually could start to push and rip that dot off the surface of your stone. So anything coarser than 120 is not recommended. I would say a 150 grit probably is a very safe media to use. 220 grit's going to maintain a little bit more of the quality perhaps of that stencil or of that small dot, especially in those brighter areas like the surface of the forehead, the nose, or the cheeks. In this case, he's got a white shirt, so all of those dot areas are really pretty small. So a 150 grit would be ideal here. However, unfortunately, in our blasting booth today, we're going to kind of live on the edge of, call it the blasting media. All I have is 120 grit in the cabinet. What I'm using is silicon carbide. You can use aluminum oxide or silicon carbide. Both are highly recyclable media. Just make sure if you're recycling the media, you don't have contamination with any other grit that you might be using in your shop. So that's going to be very, very important. If you have a larger piece of grain mixed in or contaminating your media, that's when you're going to start to push dots right off the surface of that stone. So again, 120 grit is what I'm using, silicon carbide, a little on the coarse side, but it's going to look good. 150 would be most recommended. So let's go to our cabinet. In our cabinet, I'm using a pressurized pot. This is our 2636 cabinet. I want to point out we're blasting at about 30 pounds of pressure. So there is no real set pressure that you can use. You can use 25, you can use 35. You might be pushing it with 40 pounds of pressure. The more blasting pressure you have, again, the faster the media is impacting the stone, the faster the media is impacting the stone, the more of an opportunity your media is going to have to push that dot aside. So in some cases, a lower blasting pressure and spending a little bit more time at the blast may just improve the quality of your blast. So I'm going to turn our unit on. I'm going to blast with this cabinet door open so you can see visibly what it is that I'm doing. Now what's key here is consistency. Consistency in rotation, fixed distance from my nozzle. I'm going to be very mechanical at my blast. So I'm holding this stone. Obviously, if it's a monument, you're going to want to be as comfortable as you can before blasting, so you're not contorting where it's not uncomfortable to blast. Now, with our pressure pot, I'm using a 3/32 blasting nozzle. If you had a larger blasting nozzle, again, you're putting more media into that dot pattern area, and that could actually cause your dots to shift or to move. So it is important that you're using the right size nozzle. Now this is probably just a little bigger than a 3/32, but safe enough to use. It's not an 1/8 inch for sure. So again, 30 pounds of pressure. I'm gonna start left to right. I'll go up and down, and I'll probably do a circular pattern. But the way I like to do my photos is I like to seat my mask, as I call it. I like to do a one pass across the entire surface just to make sure all my membrane area is compressed. There's no trapped air that there might be kind of hiding in an area, so I don't have any dots pulling off the surface of my stone. So I'm going to kind of seat the mask by just kind of going over the entire surface area once fairly quickly. So I'm going to kind of just, again, what I call seat my mask, go over the entire surface area fairly quickly. Looks good to me. Now I'm going to actually start my blast consistently, and you can see I'm probably a good 8-10 inches from the surface of my stone. Again, consistency is the key. Now if you had a photo which had some darker area on your first pass, now would be the time to work that darker area, like the surface of the hair, or let's just say he was in a darker suit, the lapels of that suit. Now is the time to spend a little bit more blasting time in that darker area. So I went one pass up and down. I'm going to do a second pass. And perhaps you can start to see some of this quartz in the stone kind of appearing or revealing itself. It looks a little funny on the halftone. So that's my second pass. Now I'm going to go a pass up and down. Again, trying to be as mechanical and consistent as possible. Works the perimeter of my design just a little bit. Now I'm going to do one more final pass before inspection, and I'm going to go in a circular pattern. Again, there's no right or wrong way. I'm just kind of illustrating all of the correct passes, or the passes that I would approve for blasting. In a circular pattern, you're kind of doing a bit of overwork, allowing the media to blast not just in one particular pattern. So I'm going to kind of finish it up with one final pass, and then I'm going to inspect this stone. So as I look at the cabinet, or as I look at my photo here, it looks okay, but I'm going to go back to my optimizers. I'm going to go back to my loop and do a final inspection before we go to paint. So again, this is why the optimizers or the loop is so important. It's for that inspection. You want to inspect the mask prior, before you get into the cabinet, and after blasting, just to make sure we're deep enough into the surface of the stone. We're not creating a whole lot of depth. We're just making sure we're well past the polish of this particular granite. It looks good to me, however, and I don't know if you can see, and this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking to make sure that my design area, all my blasting holes, my halftone looks deep enough. But I'm going to give it just another pass, just to ensure that I'm well past my polish point. It looks good to me, but if you're not deep enough, what could happen when you paint is some of that paint can actually pull up with, you know, you've got a paint as a web across that halftone. If it's not deep enough, you can pull up some of that paint. You're going to have to do a redo or a fix to your photo. So I'm just going to go one more pass just to ensure that I'm deep enough. So again, I'm going to go in a kind of a circular pattern here. Now, is there a point that you can blast too deep? Absolutely. I'm going to shut off our filter here. Might make a chattering noise just for a second. If you blast too deep, what potentially can happen is the deeper you go, the smaller the dots tend to kind of create more of a mountainous kind of shape. Once you get too deep, then your media can actually start to get into those holes and lift out or pull out that halftone dot. So I'm just going to look at this again, just inspecting it. To me, I can see that looks a little bit better. I'm not seeing any areas that I would be concerned with that aren't quite deep enough. Everything looks deep in the bright areas and in the darker areas. So we've covered our mask application. Most important, surface of that stone needs to be cleaned. Heat probably is going to be your best alternative to ensuring that your mask stays tight and flat. Using a good squeegee for sure. Compressing, pushing against that squeegee rather than pulling. Using your wire wheel roller perhaps, or for certain your rubber roller just to make sure it's tight and flat. And inspection. I can't emphasize how important it is to inspect that mask before you move on to the next step. Now, I'm of the mindset to, when it comes to paint filling, you can see that quartz kind of pattern in the photograph. I'm of the school to where when it comes to paint fill, we're going to use a stone toned white paint. Personally, you can apply paint right to your photomask, blow it, clean it, but I'm going to peel my stencil and I'm going to peel my tape, and the process that I'm going to use is I'm going to paint over the surface of our photo and come back over and simply just clean off all of the excess. I just find that I'm going to get paint into my halftone a little bit more efficiently, and I'm not going to allow any of that mask or any of that paint to web together in my photograph. So when I go to peel this, I don't have paint that kind of comes up with it. So I like, again, this is just me, I like to clean my photo. Going to take a blade and scrape off all of the mask. You can use a little bit of glass cleaner here as a lubricant, but certainly keep a couple of brand new razors available. I'm going to take our glass cleaner, a clean microfiber towel. Now, in this case, I could go back to using my acetone or my lacquer or my alcohol. There's no paint on here yet. So this is going to ensure that I don't have any foreign media or any adhesive in my photo. And now, once that dries, we'll go to paint. Now, if you're really concerned, you can go back through and inspect your photo, making sure everything is as deep as you need it to be and looks good. The photo looks great to me, but you can see all of the stone quartz, that pattern, that texture in that photograph. Now, perhaps if this were a 30-line screen or slightly larger, you're not going to quite see that that tone in the photograph. But because we have a pretty tight photograph and our resolution is tight, and the more compact you are, the less space there is between that dot, in between those dots. So you're going to see that quartz a whole lot easier. So I'm going to retape the area, and I'm going to go to paint. Now the reason I'm taping the area and I'm going tight against the photo is I only want to have paint on my photograph and not too much on my stone for cleanup. Now what's important here, in my opinion, is that your white highlight paint is pretty thin. You'll see in a moment, I'm going to use an automotive sprayer, and we're going to spray with a very fine particulate that paint on the surface of the stone. If our paint is not thin enough, what's going to typically happen is the paint's going to kind of web together. It's going to possibly dry before my paint gets into all of my dot pattern area. And when I go to shave that clean, some of that paint potentially could come up with it. So if you're using a highlight paint, you really want to use a 1-to-1 mixture with paint and thinner, or maybe just a little bit finer. I'm not a fan of using rattle cans here because the paint particulate is just too thick. So we're going to go to an automotive sprayer. We're going to drive down our material to where it's pretty fine, so I'm getting a very fine spray. My particulate size is very fine on this halftone photo. So come and join me. As I'm inspecting my photo, it looks good. However, I will give you some advice. If spraying and my sprayer was a little bit dry, I can almost see a little bit of paint material on the surface. It almost looks like dust on the photo. To me, that would be a sprayer that I didn't quite, or I should use a little bit more thinner in my paint, because it's not as wet as I would like it to be. It's like as it sprayed, the material dried as fast as it hit the surface of that stone. So if you're going to be driving down or using a sprayer, you might use a little bit more thinner for your halftones, so your paint goes on a little bit wetter. Hopefully that makes sense. So we'll peel this back up. Again, there's going to be a little bit more work, and the way I like to do my photos, because again, I like to paint the surface of the stone and then clean after the fact. Now again, you can leave the mask on, and when you pull the mask up, your mask not only is your blasting mask, but it also becomes your paint mask. I just find I get a little bit better control of paint when I remove the mask from the surface. So again, clean blades. I'm going to take a clean brand new razor, and I can use a little glass cleaner at this point just as a little bit of a lubricant, and I'm going to scrape off my paint surface. Now you don't have to use a lubricant, but the paint excess will come off a whole lot easier when you do. So I'm going to clean that, grab a new razor, and shave off any excess right from the top surface of those dots. Do a final clean. That looks great. It's good photo, good paint. Again, when it comes to painting, you want to make sure that your paint material is not too dry when you spray it, number one. So you want that material to be a little bit wetter, so when it hits the surface of the stone, it stays a little wetter and it doesn't create that kind of dust of paint on the surface. That's just a bit of advice. Sometimes if you go too slow, if your material, your air volume is too slow, it could actually create the same kind of dryness to the photo, or dryness to the paint particulate. So again, application is everything. Blasting pressure and grit is highly important, but what's most important here is heat against the surface of that stone and ensuring that that stone is clean with lacquer thinner or acetone or a thinner of your choice, alcohol. But that's most important. Hopefully you've learned something. Hopefully something has resonated with you. If this is your first time using a halftone photograph, practice, 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 practice. Do 2 or 3 before you get to your final production. It will just help you have more confidence in etching a halftone photograph. Thank you for your time.